The restaurant had that kind of evening glow that made everything feel more important than it was. Soft golden chandeliers spilled warm light across polished tables, glasses caught the reflections like tiny jewels, and the faint hum of a jazz band played in the background. To most guests, it was just another night of fine dining. But for Maya, the young waitress weaving through the maze of tables, it was a night she desperately wanted to survive without mistakes. She had only been working here for 2 weeks. It wasn't the kind of job she dreamed of, but it was the one that kept the lights on at her small apartment and helped pay for her mother's medication. Her shoes pinched her feet, her tray felt too heavy, and her uniform was a little too big for her frame. Still, she forced herself to smile at every table. Customers rarely saw the exhaustion behind her eyes, they only saw the polite mask she put on. At first, the night went smoothly. She carried plates of roasted lamb, trays of wine glasses, and little baskets of bread rolls without a hitch. But everything changed when she approached the corner table, the loudest one in the entire restaurant. It was a group of 4 men in their late 20s or early 30s, dressed in expensive suits and designer watches that flashed when they lifted their glasses. They weren't just customers. They were the kind of people who thought their presence was a gift to the room. Their laughter was louder than the music, their conversations laced with arrogance, and their eyes scanned the room as if everything and everyone was beneath them. As Maya neared the table, balancing a tray with 2 bottles of wine and a fresh round of glasses, one of the men leaned back in his chair. He had slicked back hair, a sharp jawline, and the kind of smirk that suggested he enjoyed making other people uncomfortable. "Careful there, sweetheart," he said in a voice loud enough to turn heads. "Don't trip. These bottles cost more than your paycheck." His friends laughed. Maya's cheeks warmed, but she bit her tongue. She had been warned during training. No matter what customers say, keep your composure. Smile, stay polite, and never talk back. So, she lowered the tray carefully onto the stand and began pouring. Her hands were steady at first, but the tension of their eyes on her every move made her grip tighten. She poured 1 glass, then another, forcing herself to stay calm. Just as she reached the 3rd, one of the men, accidentally, nudged her arm with his elbow. The motion was small, but it was enough. The stream of deep red wine tilted, splashing across the pristine white tablecloth, staining it like a wound. The entire table gasped dramatically, though none louder than the man who caused it. He shoved his chair back, glaring at her. "Unbelievable. Do you even know how to do your job?" His voice was sharp, filled with a venom that cut deeper than the mistake itself. "This is what happens when restaurants hire people who don't belong here. Now look at my suit." Maya froze, her face draining of color. The other men snickered, one of them pulling out his phone as if recording her humiliation would be the highlight of the night. Around them, other diners glanced over, whispers rising like smoke. Some pitied her, others pretended not to see, but no one stepped in. I'm so sorry, sir," Maya stammered, her voice trembling. She reached for napkins, but the man waved her away with disgust. "Don't touch me," he snapped. "Just get out of my sight before you ruin anything else." Her throat tightened. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor and escape the weight of every eye in the room. Tears blurred her vision, but she forced them back, knowing that if she cried now, they would laugh harder. She tried to steady her breathing, tried to remember the rules. Stay calm, apologize, move on. But then, another sound entered the room. Not laughter, not music, but the heavy silence that came when something, or someone, shifted the entire atmosphere. The restaurant doors had opened, and a tall figure stepped inside. He was striking without trying to be. His tailored suit was a deep charcoal, crisp against his dark skin, and the watch on his wrist caught the chandelier's glow with every step. His presence commanded attention, not because he was loud, but because he didn't need to be. He moved with quiet authority, the kind that made people instinctively straighten their backs when he passed. At first, only a few people noticed him. Then whispers began. As that? No, it can't be. Wait, isn't that Elijah Grant? The billionaire. Elijah Grant was no ordinary man. His name carried weight in boardrooms and communities alike. He had built an empire from the ground up, his story one of resilience, brilliance, and an unwavering sense of justice. But he wasn't just a billionaire. He was a symbol, someone who never forgot where he came from, someone who donated millions to causes that mattered, someone who had faced his own share of humiliation in his youth and vowed never to let it break him. As Elijah's eyes swept the restaurant, they landed on Maya. She wasn't just another waitress to him. She was a young woman trying to hold herself together as the cruel laughter of entitled men burned holes in her spirit. He saw the forced smile on her lips, the faint hair slipping down her cheek, the way her hands shook as she held onto the tray like it was her last anchor. He stopped walking. His jaw tightened. In that moment, it was clear he had seen enough. The group of men, still laughing at Maya's expense, hadn't noticed him yet. They thought the evening was theirs to control. They thought the waitress in front of them was powerless, just another face in a uniform who could be mocked without consequence. But they were wrong. Because the man now standing in the restaurant's golden light wasn't just another customer. He was a man who had clawed his way out of poverty, who knew exactly what it meant to be looked down on, who had built his empire on the principle that respect was not optional, it was essential. And in that moment, Elijah Grant decided that the humiliation Maya endured was not going to be ignored. Elijah's shoes clicked softly against the marble floor as he crossed the restaurant, every step deliberate, every stride commanding. Conversations around the room died off. Even the music from the jazz band seemed to fade as people turned their attention toward him. The group of men who had been laughing at Maya finally noticed. Their cocky expressions shifted into something else, surprise, then excitement. Recognition dawned, and one of them jumped up from his chair, suddenly eager to impress. "Mr. Grant," he exclaimed, forcing a wide grin. "What an honor. We didn't know you were dining here tonight." He gestured at Maya with a dismissive wave. "Can you believe this waitress? She nearly ruined my whole evening. Clumsy. Unprofessional. She spilled wine all over my suit. Ridiculous, isn't it?" He expected Elijah to laugh with him, to join in the mockery, to share in the arrogance of privilege. But Elijah didn't laugh. He didn't even smile. His eyes, dark, sharp, unwavering, shifted from the man to Maya, who stood frozen, clutching her tray as if it were the only thing holding her together. Elijah said nothing at first, but his silence was heavier than any words. The man who had spoken faltered, his grin slipping. Finally, Elijah spoke, his voice calm, but firm enough to cut through the entire room. "No," he said. "The only thing ruined here tonight is basic human decency." The laughter at the table evaporated. A hush fell so deep that the clinking of a single fork somewhere across the room echoed like thunder. Elijah took another step closer, his gaze fixed on the man who had humiliated Maya. "This young woman," he said, gesturing toward her, "works harder in one day than you likely do in a month. And yet, you think it's amusing to humiliate her, to treat her like she's beneath you. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." The man stammered, trying to recover. "It was just a joke, Mr. Grant. You know how it is. We didn't mean anything by it." Elijah's voice hardened. "A joke? When someone leaves their workplace in tears because of you, it's not a joke, it's cruelty. You mock her for spilling wine, when it was your own deliberate hand that caused it. You humiliate her in front of a room full of strangers, and then you hide behind laughter. Tell me, what's funny about breaking someone's dignity? The man shrank back into his chair, his arrogance melting into shame. His friends avoided eye contact, their earlier laughter now turned to nervous silence. Elijah turned slightly, addressing not just the table, but the entire restaurant. Let me tell you something. I've been where she is. I've stood in uniforms just like hers, serving tables for people who thought I was invisible, or worse, disposable. I know what it's like to be mocked, to be told you don't belong. And I also know this. True wealth isn't measured in dollars or suits or fancy watches. True wealth is measured in respect, in kindness, in how you treat people who can give you nothing in return. Every word seemed to reverberate through the restaurant. Some guests nodded in agreement. Others shifted uncomfortably, reminded of their own moments of silence in the face of cruelty. Then Elijah turned to Maya. His tone softened, his eyes warm with understanding. You don't have to apologize to anyone tonight. Least of all to them. Maya blinked, stunned. Her lips parted as if to respond, but no words came out. For so long, she had been told to keep her head down, to endure, to swallow her pride just to keep her job. And here was Elijah Grant, the man whose name carried more weight than anyone else in the room, telling her she had nothing to be ashamed of. Elijah reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek black card, placing it firmly on the manager's podium. Every staff member here gets a bonus tonight. And this young woman, he pointed at Maya, deserves a raise. Immediately, the manager, wide-eyed and pale, nodded furiously. Why yes, Mr. Grant, of course. The group of men at the table squirmed, their earlier arrogance completely shattered. One of them muttered an apology under his breath, but Elijah didn't even glance at them. They no longer mattered. As he turned to leave, Elijah paused, his final words directed once again at the room, though they seemed to hang especially heavy over the men at that corner table. Never mistake silence for weakness. Some of us notice, and some of us will never let injustice pass unnoticed. He walked toward the exit, his shoulders straight, his presence unshaken. The room buzzed with whispers once again, not mocking this time, but filled with awe, respect, and reflection. People who had pretended not to see Maya's humiliation now found themselves replaying the moment, wondering why they hadn't spoken up first. Maya stood rooted to the spot, her tray still clutched against her chest. But this time, her tears weren't from shame. They spilled freely down her cheeks, carrying relief, gratitude, and something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The other waitstaff approached her quietly, some giving her reassuring smiles, others patting her shoulder. Even a few diners called her over softly, offering kind words and encouragement. She felt seen, truly seen, in a way she hadn't before. Later that night, after her shift finally ended, Maya walked home beneath the city's neon lights. Her feet still ached, her uniform still smelled faintly of wine, but her spirit felt different, lighter, stronger. She replayed Elijah's words in her mind. True wealth is measured in how you treat people who can give you nothing in return. It struck her because that was the life she had lived all along. She had little money, little power, but she had always treated others with kindness, even when it wasn't returned. And tonight, someone had finally recognized that, not just anyone, but a man whose voice carried enough weight to silence a room. When she reached her apartment, she opened the door quietly, not wanting to wake her mother. She set her bag down and sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her hands. They still trembled, but not from fear anymore. They trembled from the weight of possibility, from the idea that maybe, just maybe, her life didn't have to be defined by humiliation and silence. For the first time in years, she believed that things could change. As for Elijah, he returned to his car, sliding into the leather seat as his driver waited for instructions. He looked out at the glowing city and thought about Maya. Her resilience reminded him of himself, of the days when he was invisible in rooms full of power. Drive, he told his driver. But in his mind, he was already considering something else. Perhaps a scholarship fund for working students, or a new initiative for young people like Maya who worked tirelessly but went unseen. Because to Elijah Grant, the fight against injustice didn't end at a restaurant confrontation. It was a lifelong mission. And tonight was just another reminder of why he never stopped. That night, two lives changed in very different ways. For Maya, it was the night she realized her worth could never again be dictated by cruel words. For Elijah, it was the night he was reminded why he fought so hard for people who were once like him. And for everyone else in that restaurant, it was the night they learned that silence in the face of cruelty was not just cowardice, it was complicity.